Did you want to hear about how the philosophy of Jordan Village has changed? Would you like me to tell you about that?
I was about to ask you about that because that's kind of like I see it now as a kind of unofficial sub-appellation.
Yeah, well, that's a, oh wow, you touched on something I probably wouldn't have, but that's a great one. So why? Well, it's sort of like the idea of Meursault or the idea of Volnay, Volnay village. Any parcel from the village can be declassified in the case of, let's say, Von Romani. You have some village parcels that are denoted as village, but if you want to knock down a couple of barrels of, La Grande Rue or Echezeaux or Les Souchaux into your village, you can. If you don't, you may have several plots of village Vaughan that you unify together. And it's that sense that we mean in the village of Jordan. And I was the one who pushed for that name because I felt that the old name Village Reserve was not correct or accurate anymore. The Village Reserve in the past was a lot of parcels that we knew weren't of single vineyard character, but we did the best we could with them without over-macerating or over-oaking, just doing them fine, and then declassifying Claystone, La Petite, the Talon Ridge single vineyard, and the Grand Clos into them to make it better. That's what it used to be. But now, against the background of where we only single vineyard we make is a Grand Clos, we now can take whatever parcels we want for this. So it's a whole new thing. It is the old single vineyard parcels put together because, as you can imagine, when the Clos originally was put into mothballs, those parcels disappeared a lot of different ways within our terre. There was lots of use for them. I know some blocks, people have noticed that the Jackson Triggs Chardonnay and Pinot are getting better every year, and they're quite dry and they're beautifully done with subtle oak. Levi does a great job over there, and Phil Brown. But also, for sure, some of those grapes were going to Enniskillen, but they were also going to Entourage. And as you know, the JT Entourage, I have nothing to do with this, right? I just note that the JT Entourage Bubble Series is a classic Burgundian Champenois blend, but also they have other Blanc de Blancs and other things in the works and Brut Rosés. So a lot of that fruit was going to the bubbly program, and there was just it was so easy to claw back the parcels that I thought would work together. But Jamie, my biggest worry was, how do you put three soloists together, ex-single vineyards? How do you put three soloists together and make them be a choir? Before we had a choir for the Village Reserve. Now we have the Jordan Village. So I think the idea was just to make the wine separately. And so we made a claystone of each, and we made a Talon Ridge in the white, but not in the red. And in the Clos Jordanne, we made 3 different parcels of Clos Jordanne. And when we came to do the blending 16, 18, 19 months later, we said, what works together and what has its own identity, and which barrels have to be declassified from each lot to make this happen. And then when we had found out what was going into the Grand Clos, which barrels of the Grand Clos could come down, because I'd hate to see them go anywhere else. So you have a fairly representative version of the best blocks of the lower bench in the Jordan Village. And my big worry about this, as I said right after your question, was that the appellation is strictly 20-mile bench, but here we wanted to use the Niagara Peninsula appellation because of a crazy law where if you put Vinemount Ridge together with 20-mile bench, it becomes Niagara, which is crazy. I'm going to try to get it changed. As I think I said in the call to you the other day, if you go over to Malivoire and they put Quarry Ridge, Vinemount Ridge, together with Robbins Block, which is 20 Mile Bench, they would have to call it Niagara Peninsula, and it's all formed by taws on the Vineland Bench, you know. So we must take a look at what those two appellations could be called, because as soon as you call something Niagara Peninsula, I think some people assume there's Niagara Lake on it, because
Yeah.
there's so many vines in Niagara Lake, which is absolutely not the case. So anyway, we ended up with a nice blend of wine that was not in the red, that was not claystone dominant, because claystone has an irony, bloody sauvage streak running through it, nor was it the Clos or Grand Clos dominant. So it just netted out at this slightly older viney feel, slightly tighter, more tightly wound, and at the same time juicier than we used to have. So I mean, I think there's a part of, none of us have ever seen this before, the single vineyard partials being blended together. And so we've never had the problem before blending these now older vines together in proportions that were previously impossible, because these things were all gone to the single vineyards. So it's quite a new thing, really.
Well, I love all of your wines, always have done. But I thought with these two that we tasted at the virtual tasting the other week, the Jordan Village wines, white and the red, I really thought they really punched above their weight. But that, your explanation now kind of gives me insight as to how you created wines of that quality from the fruit that was available to you. Really quite astonishing stuff.
Yeah, I'm quite astonished myself. I mean, I know that I do a lot of my stuff in Vineland. Craig Wismer and his family own a lot of the Vineland vineyards, and Vineland is also planted mostly to Chardonnay and Pinot, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the right part of the world for it. It's also planted to Gamay, which is great in Vineland, and a bit of Riesling. But basically, Jordan and Vineland have self-selected to become Niagara's home of Pinot and Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Which is not to say that you can't do it in Niagara Lake or Beamsville. It's just, it's been self-selected to specialize in that, right? So it's very interesting, and it's since we've never done it before, in what you tasted, which I think was still a little bottle shock, I think you'll see the same elegance later on with a little more fullness and a little more bottle perfume. However, I think what you're tasting is amalgam of doing this assemblage of the greatest vineyards, and also the vines are older, and nobody looked at them for 6 years or 8 years, whatever the time lapse was. So I can't parse it out what was what, but they're just sort of easier to work with now to get finesse. When vines are young, it's easy to get bombast, but it's hard to get finesse, because when vines are young, the yields are low. If you get a good summer, pow, you get this big fruity thing. And you know, so I find working over in Vineland, we have sort of richer, more four-square flavors that are nonetheless very fine. But on the Jordan side of the 20 Mile Creek, or Balls Falls, however you want to see it, Jordan Harbor, on the Jordan side, there seems to be a chalkiness and a finesse that we don't see on the Vineland side. It's sort of like comparing Chassagne and Puligny. It's a good problem to have, you know.
So one thing I have to ask you, and you may think this is a load of bollocks, but we tasted those wines on a Monday, which is usually my dry day. So I just had a little sip of them, put the screw caps back on, and left them for 4 days. But I did notice, I think it was a root day in the biodynamic calendar, the day that we tasted the wines. When I tasted them 4 days later, whether it was the oxygen getting into them and opening them up, or the fact that I think it was a flower day, the wines tasted significantly better 4 days later.
It's amazing, you know, and I had meant to look that up, but I have certainly seen these fruit and flower day things to not be a load of bollocks. I've seen it to be, I don't usually pay attention, because when I release something, I'm tasting it often enough so that it shouldn't really matter. Like, but I do notice there's sometimes I open things for people, and it's like saying to your child, now sing for grandfather and sing that song you learned at school, and they're not singing that day.
Exactly.
Yeah. There is, It's for
because
sure. There's something to
I've
do with
been
that.
I've been observing it for the last, I would say, the last 12 years, and I wouldn't go and look at my app to see what the day was. I would taste the wine and then think, if there's a wine you really enjoy, you taste often enough, and it tastes a bit meh, I would look, and it would tend to be a leaf or a root day. So over a dozen years, I now believe that I don't enjoy drinking wines as much on those days. So I actually avoid opening wine on those days and drink beer instead, or gin.
Ah,
Seriously.
there you go.
Yeah.
Probably even beer tastes better on the fruit days, and when maybe the flower days, the hot flowers come to the floor for who knows.
Possibly. Anyway,
But I think there's something to it, and I think you're starting to have a data bank of anecdotal evidence,
yeah,
which is starting to become something like research.
yeah, in a way.
Yeah, and I wanted to also say, um, I think the project, again, these are Thomas's opinions. I don't really know what happened inside when the project went down, but I can tell you about the zeitgeist of the Renaissance. If you remember, I said earlier, it didn't have to be the Clos, but in the end, they decided they wanted to be a Clos. I wanted the same beautiful bottle that I like to use, the grower's bottle, with one of the modern technical corks that are not able to have really any corkiness. They wanted a screw cap. And although I lost that battle, I love to think of it is just about being, because you can get different grades of screw cap, as you well know. And I like to think of, they wanted to show some evolution. The vines were older, and here was the packaging evolution. They thought, it was a nice audacious statement for a $45 wine. So I would say that's another factor. But really what's happening is nothing will happen unless the previous thing goes well. There's no, they're not under the gun. The fruit's all spoken for. When I want more fruit, we have to claw it back from someone else. But there's 50 hectares. That's something like 110 acres.
Yeah.
And so 115 acres. So where I'm going with that is right now we're sitting on, Jamie, there's a meter by meter planting as you come up into the Clos that we did on virgin soil. And as those vines get older, I've always wanted to do a single vineyard on them. I thought my successor, Sebastian Jacquet, might. He never did. So we're making that every year, and we're looking for some special quality, and we'd love to make a single vineyard claystone again. So we'll be looking at that. And the other thing is, I'd really like, because it's planted 75% to the red grapes, Pinot Noir, I'd love to see us try a Blanc de Noir. So not beholden to the past, in that we're glad that the vineyards exist and the brand recognition exists, but going, every time we do something, it has to be good, and then it has to find a market. Yeah. So if we find that the Blanc de Noir isn't good, we don't even have it bottled yet, the tirage hasn't even been done. If it isn't good, we won't put it out. So the next step after the Grand Clos was, as you know, the Jordan Village. I was a little worried that VQA may not accept that, because it's almost like we're saying that the Jordan side of the 20-mile bench appellation, with Vineland being the other side, is different. And but we went to the top of VQA and they accepted it. And so all the vineyards are in Jordan, so it's Jordan Village. The way the laws sit, you've got to call it Niagara Peninsula. So that's we want a sense of place. And I think the other thing is, Jamie, I'd love to see them do a small visitor center up there with a white barrel cellar, maybe, or white and red cellar, maybe just do the Grand Clos up there, and have people be able to book in appointments up there, because it's one of the most projects in all of Niagara that's wedded to the soil. Think Hidden Bench. what if Hidden Bench was really hidden and you could never get to it? It'd be terrible. Like nobody knows where the Clos is, and yet it's this uber precise terroir thing.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to try to pester people to put capex aside going forward to build a very modest building up there. Currently, the wines are being made at Jackson Trigg, so I'm there 3 days a week, and we rub shoulder to shoulder with Levi DeLorean and Phil Brown, who are doing a great job there. The Clos has its own dedicated part of the cellar, and I really enjoy having them on the side to make sure that nobody sets a foot awry, so we can really make sure it not only has its renaissance but stays this time. The Clos.
Yep, I hear you. Well, Thomas, thank you very much for giving us such an extended insight into what's behind the curtain at the new revitalized Le Clos. Really appreciate your time, as always, and we look forward to sharing a glass with you at some point in the near future, shall we say. It's been a long time since I've been down to Niagara, like a year and a half, so I have to make my way down there.
Yes, well, listen, if you'd like to come down, we can either walk the Le Clos vineyards or go taste at the JT cellar out of Barrel. They're all sitting there the way they always were, completely apart. And of course, the Bachelder, there's 2 bat caves now, so you must see that. We're up to 20 growers. If I could leave you with one thought, which you can take or leave, is imagine going. What struck me when I came back to the project was imagine going to Burgundy and finding out that a particular village that you had planned to visit had no wines on the market that year. Now, the village in question is Jordan. Now, of course, Ed Madronich and David Shepard and Ali Finn had wines up at Flat Rock, as did Westcott. But in the lower bench, the classic part of the bench, I'm not saying it is better or worse. I'm just saying it is a known thing. There was no lower bench wine on the market between 2012 and 2017.
Yeah.
So imagine people coming and visiting. What does Jordan taste like? Well, you can go up to the second bench of Jordan and get some bloody good Flat Rock and great Westcott, but there was a hole. As a terroir, it was missing. So every time somebody at our terroir would say to me, so great to bring the brand back, I'm like, we must call it a project. We're restoring a swath of land that people haven't been able to buy bottles from for 7 years.
Yeah,
that's weird and wonderful, So now we can taste once again Jordan, and that's one thing I will do with you for sure. Is when you come down, if you remind me, because I've got so many growers in Gamay now, I'll be jumping in a million directions. But we should sit down and say, here's what Jordan tastes like with the same winemaker, and here's what Vineland tastes like. We can choose the closest possible elevation and distance from the lake, and they're different. It's so cool.
I shall look forward to that opportunity, Thomas. Thank you very much for the invitation, and we'll catch up again sometime very soon, I hope.
And hi to the family.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye now.